All right, so right now we're going to be going over the midterm review. So just going to go through this as if we were in person, just point by bullet point. And so just make sure that you know the concept. So I'm not going to give you all answers to the exam, but if you know the concepts that we're talking about, then you should do well on the exam. So first, make sure you know how to identify the different components of the scientific method. All right, so when we did this, this was the presentation that we used for that. And so you can see here, make sure that you know the steps of the scientific method. And again, remember the scientific method is just the ultimate problem solving tool, right? So you can use this in any aspect of your life. But basically, you identify a problem, right? So you notice something going on. When we did our effervescent tablet lab, remember we noticed the thing that we noticed that we observed was that when we put a tablet in, the temperature started dropping, right? So that was the observation you made. And then after that, you formed a hypothesis, and that should have gone something along the lines like, if I put tablets in the water, then the temperature is going to drop. Right. And so a lot of y'all made that hypothesis. And then we did the experiment, right? And we kept dropping tablets into the water. And every time we dropped tablets, the temperature kept dropping and dropping and dropping. Right. So this experiment was done to test the hypothesis, whether it was supported or not, that the more tablets you drop in, the lower the temperature gets. And we saw, right, when we did that, we collected the data, we wrote down the temperatures for every tablet that we dropped. So I think we had like 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 tablets, right? And then we recorded the temperature for each one of those. So that was our data collection. And then after that, we formed a conclusion, right? Either this experiment either proved supported our hypothesis, or did not support our hypothesis, right? That was our conclusion. And we didn't do the retest part, but if it was something that you were trying to make sure it wasn't a fluke or just like some lucky a one-time thing, you want to retest it and try it again. Right. So these are the steps of the scientific method. But remember, how do you identify these in a statement? So if you see a statement, will you be able to pick out the different parts of the scientific method? So right here, we have a few examples. So let's go through these. And right here, you can't really see, but here there should be an option D. This formative thing is kind of blocking it. But D right here is test a hypothesis. This one is draw a conclusion. So again, D is an option here for this. Let me just put it like right here. All right, so let's go ahead and go through these then. Remember just things about the scientific method, and let me go back one really quick. 1 second. So right here, remember the way you're going to identify these is number one, make an observation. So again, you just notice something is going on, and you're just like, I wonder what's going on. Right then for B right here, where it says form a hypothesis, right here, that's number 3. Form a hypothesis. You'll usually have like if and then in the statement, and if you don't have the word specifically if and then, it's usually like a cause and effect. So if you do this, then it's going to cause this to happen, right? If you do this, then this is going to happen. That is how you form a hypothesis. That's how you know that one of these statements is a hypothesis. And then you have test the hypothesis with an experiment, and that got kind of cut off there, but that's how you test your hypothesis, right? That's how we tested the hypothesis about the temperature dropping, is we did an experiment. And remember, y'all, how the experiment was. It's almost like a recipe, right? You have materials, but then you have steps, right? First you have to do this, then you have to do this, then you have to do this. That's how you know that the statement is describing an experiment, because it's again going step by step by step on how you're going to do something. It's a process. Right then, finally down here, D, draw a conclusion. Usually, a key for that one is you'll see something that'll say some like along the lines of the data showed or the experiment showed. And this is showing you that already passed, right? It happened already. You already collected all the data. So the only thing left is to draw a conclusion. So don't get confused and think like because it says experiment there that it's this one here, that it's C, test the hypothesis with an experiment. If it says that the experiment showed or the data showed, that means that step already passed, right? Past tense. So then the only thing left is to form a conclusion. All right, so now let's look at these right here. Let's look at some examples. And these are ones that we did earlier during one of the video lessons. And so we'll do just a few examples here so you can kind of see a little bit of each one of these A, B, C, or D. Right, so the first one, it says recognize a problem here, but remember this can also be the same thing as, and let me just kind of write it next to it so don't lose track of that. So make, whoops, not an observation, make an observation. Right, so again, this can also be, I put it right here, right next to this.
right there next to recognize a problem, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. It can just be an observation you make, right? And that's usually the first step. And then again, form a hypothesis, test a hypothesis with an experiment, draw a conclusion. So let's look at some of these examples right here. So let's do number one. Let's start with that. Stephen predicted that seeds would start to grow faster if an electric current traveled through the soil in which they were planted. Right. So in this one, you got to ask yourself, what is this question telling me? What is this statement saying? And in this case, it's saying that Stephen said that basically, if you were to pass an electrical current through the soil, then the seeds would grow faster, right? And this is a cause and effect. If he does this, then this is going to happen. If I pass an electrical current through the soil, then the plants will start to grow faster, right? So right there, it's telling me an if and then, and it doesn't necessarily have the words then in here. It has the word if, but not then. But again, it's cause and effect. So for this one, the answer would be B, because he is again making a cause and effect statement. If this happens, then this is going to happen. If I pass a current through the electrical current through the soil, then the plants are going to grow faster. All right, so that would be an example of B. Let's see the next one. So this one is very, it gives you a clue, right? Very user friendly here, because right off the bat, you see this right here. So that's usually telling you that this will most likely be a hypothesis, not 100%, right? But that word is there. So let's see if this is making a cause and effect statement, right? Let's see if this is saying, if I do this, then this is going to happen. So Susan said, if I fertilize my geranium plants, they will blossom. The word then isn't there, but you could very easily put it there, right? If I fertilize my geranium plants, then they will blossom, right? But this is what it's telling you. If I do this, it's going to cause this to happen. If I fertilize my plants, it's going to cause them to blossom, right? So if and then right here, this is a hypothesis statement also. All right. And then let's keep scrolling. All right. So here we have number 3. And it's saying Jonathan's data showed that household cockroaches moved away from cucumber slices. All right. So right here, you kind of see a clue. His data showed. Remember, you can't collect data until after you've already done the experiment, right? Without doing the experiment, you won't have any data. So this right here kind of shows that the experiment already passed, right? And there's only one thing right here that happens after the experiment, and that is draw the conclusion. Whoops. Draw a conclusion right there, right? So the data showed this, and this was the conclusion that cockroaches move away from raw cucumber slices. I don't know if that's true, but that's interesting if it is. And so right here, this was drawing a conclusion, right? Because he already did the experiment, and the experiment's data showed that they move away from raw cucumber slices. All right, so we've seen an example of beef. We saw 2 examples of that. We saw one of drawing a conclusion, and let's see what this next one is going to tell us. So Renee grew bacteria from the mouth on special plates in the laboratory. She placed drops of different mouthwashes on bacteria on each plate. Then she measured the growth. Right, this is kind of very similar to what we were doing in the lab with the experiments. We would do one step and then another step and then another step, and then we measured different things. Right, in one lab we measured the temperature, and another the circumference of the balloons. But in either case, this right here is an experiment that she's doing. Right, she or he, right? I don't know which the name is, so we'll just go with she. Renee is doing an experiment right here. Right, she's again doing the first step, which is placing the drops of different mouthwashes on different bacteria, then measuring the growth of each one. This is an experiment. Right, so let's see. So again, we've seen an example for B, or we saw 2. We saw this one was testing the hypothesis with an experiment, and then drawing conclusions. We saw an example of that. So let's look for an example of recognize a problem.
All right, so trying to find one that is an example of recognize a problem. So let's kind of look through these really quick and see if we can find one of those. So, like number 6 right here. Number 6 says, Jose saw bats catching insects after dark. He asked, how do bats find the insects in the dark? So right here you see a question, right? But it's not really an if and then statement, right? It's not saying if I do this, then this is going to happen. And so it's a question, right? This is asking a question. It's just asking, how do they find insects in the dark, right? He observed something happening, and he's just like, well, how does this happen? And so for this one, and again, it erased right now when I switched screens. But remember, this is also the same as saying make observation.
up with this right here. And that's all he was doing right here is he was making that observation, right? Very similar to when we observed that the temperature was dropping when we put that tablet in there. And so, just noticing that something was happening. So for this one right here, this would be make a problem, or sorry, recognize a problem. But more for this one is just make an observation, right? You see something happening and you just got to question, well, how does that happen? Right? That's how the whole process of science starts. Let's look for one more right here. I like this one right here, number 7. So Justin wondered if, and again, this is going to be an example of recognize a problem or make an observation. And sorry, I kind of scrolled out of there, but make an observation, right? So right here, Justin wondered if dyes could be taken out of plant leaves, flowers, and stems. And so here, he's not making an if and then statement, right? He's not saying if I do this, then this is going to happen. He's just wondering. He's just asking a question, right? Making an observation is like, well, plant leaves or plants, flowers, stems are colorful, right? They're green or red or whatever color the leaves or flowers are. And so he's asking, like, well, if these are colorful, can I actually take those colors out of the plants, leaves, flowers, right? He's just making an observation right here. He's just asking a question. So he's not really forming a hypothesis. He's not saying, if I do this, then this is going to happen. And he's definitely not doing an experiment, right? He's not doing different steps. So first he does this, then he does this, then he does this. No, that's not there either. And he can't do draw conclusions if he hasn't done any of this, right? So for this one, it is recognize a problem or make an observation. All right, so we've seen a few of these. A few examples. So now try these. You may have seen these earlier in the term, but it's been a while. So right here, what is this? Is this A, recognize a problem, make an observation? Is it B, form a hypothesis? Is it C, test a hypothesis with an experiment? Or is it D, draw a conclusion? So Stephen predicted that his plants would start to grow faster if he used a green light on his plants. Which is this? Jane said, if I use phosphorus fertilizer on my roses, they will bloom sooner. So which is this? All right, Juan's data showed that plants grown under a green light will not grow as large. And let me actually blow this up. Sorry about that. Juan's data showed that plants grown under a green light will not grow as large as plants grown under a white light. Tyrion said, if I grow 5 seedlings in soil, I think the plants will grow faster than the 5 seedlings grown in liquid nutrients. Sansa's experiment proved that ticks move towards carbon dioxide gas. John fed different diets to 3 groups of pigeons. His experiment showed that pigeons need vitamin C in their diets. Varys saw shrews catching insects after dark. He asked, how do shrews find the insects in the dark? And shrew is a kind of bird. Daenerys wondered if dyes could be taken out of plants, flowers, and stems. So this one may look familiar. Gregor soaked 8 different kinds of seeds in water for 48 hours. Then she planted the seeds in the soil at a depth of 2 centimeters. She used the same amount of water, light, and nutrients for each kind of seed. So which is this? Joffrey's experiment showed that lizard eggshells were stronger when she gave the mother lizard food, to which extra calcium had been added. Arya noticed that food sitting on the counter went rotten more quickly than food in the refrigerator.